So I just finished watching The Ultimate Computer. This was one of the best episodes I've seen so far. This was also an episode that I'd heard a lot of people talk about. The other week I was in the comic book shop and a bunch of folks were there like, hey, have you gotten to the Ultimate Computer episode yet? And I was like, no, I haven't. I don't know where that falls. And it just turns out it happens to be the next episode I'm doing. So, really excited about that. Alright, so the premise of this episode. The Enterprise is going to hook up with the rest of Starfleet to do some sort of war game scenario. And when they get there, they find out that the Enterprise is going to be outfitted with a new computer system. The M5, created by this guy named Dr. Daystrom. And this is where we start to see, I think, Star Trek at its best writing. The M5 gets put into the Enterprise, and it begins to take over the Enterprise as the captain. Not in a malicious way or anything like that. It just basically starts saying, hey, these people are unnecessary. And it dismisses a huge chunk of the crew. And they're going to go and do this little planetary exploration. And it sets up who's going to go. And I don't know. I imagine today, if this was done, it would have been done a little in self-parody. And I don't know if they were going for that at the time, but it came off as a little funny as well. Because, you know, every episode when they go down to the planet, it's Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and a bunch of red shirts. You know, sometimes Sulu or Scotty or Uhura will go with them. But, you know, it's the main three and then, you know, rest of the crew. Or sometimes just the main three. This time, Kirk and Bones don't go. Or they're not selected. And it really pisses Kirk off. I thought that was brilliant. Like I said, I don't think they were necessarily going for like a little tongue-in-cheek parody thing at the time, where today I could have seen it work better because we know how silly that concept kind of got. But anyway, Kirk doesn't go because he's not needed. The computer says, yeah, you're a captain. You're not like a biologist or a geologist or an astronomer. You're not a sociologist or an archaeologist. We're going to this planet. This guy over here, yeah, he went to this planet 10 years ago. You know, even though he's like some disposable red shirt, his knowledge is far more valuable than yours, Kirk. You're the captain. You're not needed. And McCoy, you're a doctor. You're not needed either unless somebody gets hurt, and then you just stay in sickbay. Wow, that was awesome. So Kirk and McCoy have this wonderful back and forth where, you know, McCoy has always kind of been the moral center of that trio, and him really asking some deep questions of Kirk. And I think more than just him asking the questions of Kirk, this is the question that we all get asked watching this episode. What is the worth of a man? Because we have this computer that has now replaced almost the entire crew. Kirk is not needed anymore. McCoy is not needed unless somebody gets hurt. You know, Spock is still there because of his insight, but we can see him quickly being replaced. And in reality, everybody being replaced at some point. Daystrom is really attached to this computer in kind of a weird way, too. But I want to get back to what I was saying about the worth of a man. And it kind of reminded me of the story of John Henry in a way. If you don't know the story, real quick, John Henry was an ex-slave who worked for the railroad in the United States, laying ties and hammering the spikes in. One day the owner of the railroad has this new machine that can drive the spike twice as fast as a man, which means John Henry and all of his friends are going to be out of work. John Henry challenges the machine to a competition to see who can do it faster. Henry beats the machine, but in the end winds up dying because he exhausts himself so much. And I kind of saw this episode as the Star Trek version of that. And it worked really well. Kirk, his entire identity is wrapped up in captain. Or at least that's how he perceives himself. You take away the captain element, and who is he? He's just James T. Kirk. And he is not okay with that. He needs to be in control of the ship. That's his entire identity. And he and McCoy discussed that a bit. And I think that was really heavy. It's like, wow, you know, this is the first time I think we've seen Kirk really be humbled in this way. We've seen him change his mind. We've seen him, re-examine some stuff. But I've never seen Kirk humbled in this way. The story really goes into an interesting place when they are going for the war game element. And they're bringing that up. And the M5 computer now has control over the entire Enterprise, including its weapons, its shields, and its engines, everything. And they come across another ship. It's some sort of cargo ship that's hauling ore. And the M5 opens fire on it and destroys it. And Kirk has this really great moment where he and Daystrom are going at it, and that, luckily nobody was living on that ship. It was just an empty ship. But the M5 destroyed it for no reason. And Daystrom was like, well, it perceived it as a threat, and on and on and on. Really great dialogue there. Where it gets super serious is when the other 4 ships that are involved in the war games show up, and the M5 just begins to destroy them. And we're now seeing actual loss of life. Like one ship loses like 100-some people in one hit, and another ship loses its captain and its first mate. And there's this huge struggle of what's going to happen. And I think this is where the episode really pulls it full circle. We do get to see Kirk argue the machine, but we get to see Kirk really show us that while machines can operate faster than us, there are some things machines just can't do, like gamble. And Kirk gambles on the notion that he knows one of the other captains, and he knows what that captain will do, so Kirk manages to shut down the Enterprise, thereby saving it, because this other captain sees that there's something weird going on. That's something that the M5 couldn't do. That's the whole strength of this episode, is the worth of a man. What can a machine do that a man can't? And we get a lot of the great dialogue with Spock and Bones back and forth. Spock being the very calculated one, saying that machines are far more efficient. And there is a really great level of dialogue at the end between the 3 main characters. Awesome episode. This is another episode I think that people could really sit down and analyze, much like City or even I, Mud. And in some ways this episode kind of reminded me of I, Mud. Although I, Mud was a little goofier in some ways, this episode really was not silly at all. So if you're going into this thinking, oh yeah, it's kind of like I, Mud, no. It's much heavier. This the story has a lot of great elements that we've seen in other stories. The man versus machine. The M5, very reminiscent of HAL or the Skynet computers. Some ways it's reminiscent of iRobot. Not the movie, the book by Asimov. Side note, if you've not read the book, read the robot stuff, read his Foundation saga. They're incredible. Stay away from the Will Smith movie. That was an abomination. I digress. But we've seen this before. Even like The Matrix had this element of man versus machine. It's something that I think is not really just a science fiction piece. Because like I said, John Henry was man versus machine. And that story's 150 years old. You go back to Greek stories, and there's going to be stuff in there. Icarus is kind of a man versus machine sort of thing. And I think that's what it is. At what point do we start valuing what machines can do over what men can do? So, anyway, The Ultimate Computer, I really, really enjoyed this episode. This is going on my top list. New Time, Trek people, this is a must-see. This is top 5 if you want to get into Trek, as far as I'm concerned. The acting was great. The story was great. The acting, really, this is some of the best acting I've seen. Overall, solid episode, guys. So, I've talked enough about this, and I will see you later.